Good morning, Facebook. Who's responsible? So I want to talk about a live training session that I did in our Boots on the Ground online portal last week. I was meant to share this earlier this week, but I never. So I just want to touch back on it. Now, who's responsible for certain things on a project? And the question came as a result of, morning Jason, morning Michael. The question came as a result of a project that an investor had running, and there was some confusion around principal contractor versus project manager. Now this investor, client, building owner, however you want to define them, had this expectation that the project manager was fulfilling the role of principal contractor. I'm here to tell you that those two roles are completely different, and there is some sort of fallacy belief in the industry that if you appoint a project manager, you by de facto appoint that person or body, business, whatever you want to call them, as the principal contractor. And that is simply not the case. So the difference between the two is that your principal contractor is a role defined under CDM. So it's a role defined under the Construction and Design Management Regulations. 2015, I think, is the latest version. I'd have to check with Lisa. Yes, 2015, I'm sure it is. So that role is defined under there, and under that role comes a set of legal responsibilities that must be discharged. I won't go into what those responsibilities are. That's one for the actual training. But just to highlight the difference between the two. So if you're employing or appointing a project manager to run your project, one of the roles of the project manager is to appoint a principal contractor. Now, that may well be himself or the business that he represents, but the appointment still has to be made. And as I said, the two roles are completely different. A project manager is going to manage the project, and one of those elements that needs to be managed is the appointment of the personalities, the principal contractor, the subcontractor, and the principal designer. Those things have to happen under the role of project manager. I hope that makes sense. I wanted to do this on the iPad, but if you've got any doubt, questions or queries, bang on over to the HSE's website. The rules are clearly defined in there, and you can download yourself a little checklist, a little check sheet to make sure you're doing what you know, what you should be doing under the law. So it is, off the top of my head now, www.hse.gov.uk, or just Google principal contractor responsibilities under CDM, and it'll take you direct to a link. It'll give you a little cheat sheet, little check sheet, that you can make sure that everything's in place that should be in place, and you're making the correct appointments under CDM, and not just assuming that those responsibilities have been delegated down to your project manager. Throughout these various talks and various rooms that I've been in, the most common question that I'm being asked, and what people are asking of other panels, is when should you pay your tradesman once on these on your refurb projects. Might be a refurb, any adding value project. So you could be on a refurb, building an extension, or even a new build. So when should you pay your tradesman? When should I be paying? So the short answer is you must just do what you said you'd do. So if you told your tradesman you'd pay them a deposit and then maybe stage payments throughout and then a lump sum at the end, then that's what you must stick to, given that all the parameters are met during that process. And what I mean by that is whatever you agreed up front, they're your terms. So those terms, you've got to deliver on those terms if you want to have a good reputation, if you want to have these guys work with you again and build that all-elusive team that you're trying to build. That's been the answer I've given on these calls, on these chats. But, I guess the underpinning question is, what should those terms actually be? And again, there's no right or wrong here. It's what's going to work for you and your cash flow and how your projects are being delivered. So is it right that a builder asks you for a deposit for money in advance of them starting work? And I'm always going to say, of course. Of course there is. There's always going to be a time when a deposit is necessary, a deposit's required. And what you're paying for there when you hand over money for a deposit is the time in a person's diary, is first and foremost, and any pre-start costs that they might incur as a result of working on your project. So they might be have to buy materials, they might have to order something bespoke, they might need to submit an application to building control or planning or something like that, structural engineer's report, any drawings, time out of their day to get stuff sorted. All them things all come at cost. Most builders are asking for deposits these days just to secure some sort of payment in advance of a project starting, for all the reasons I've just gone through there, why a person would ask for a deposit. And it's the same for any industry, really, that's asking for a deposit. Morning, Jim. Ironically, you coming on there. So if you're booking a tattoo, for instance, the tattooist is likely going to want a deposit to secure that time in his diary. Because if you don't pay a deposit and you don't show, you've lost nothing. But the tattooist has, he's lost a day. He's lost a day out of his week, his month, out of his income. So that's one of the reasons that guys are asking for deposits. So when we talk about payment terms throughout that project, like I said, there's no right or wrong here. It's what works for you and works for your cash flow, works for your business, and what you're comfortable with setting up. But the key thing is having that communication to start with, and both of you singing off the same hymn sheet. You as the client and the builder as the service provider. You've got to know and understand when those payments are going to be coming and sticking to that. There's nothing worse than doing a piece of work, invoicing, and then it not being paid in accordance with the terms. When you're chasing payments and wondering if you're going to get knocked, wondering if you're going to get paid, it's just going to create friction on your projects that you can truly avoid by having a plan and having some terms in place to be able to do that. I want to talk about systems a little bit after an event this morning. Now, when I was in the corporate world working for a large organisation, systems were the thing that the business was built on. And I had sort of 10 years operating in that way, and I really hated it. I really hated the whole systemization thing. Coming from them, you were asking a question and you were just getting diverted to, what does the procedure say? What does the process say? And you was like, just give me a fucking answer, will you? And that I used to end up getting really frustrated with my boss at the time, and these systems I saw at the time as something that the company that I was working for were using to try and hide behind stuff and get out of giving me a straight answer. What does the procedure say? What does the system say? So the first thing I did when I set up my own business was I didn't want any systems. I didn't want to operate like that. And what a fucking mistake that was. So I had about a year of doing it with my phone off the hook. Phone was ringing all day long. Everybody questioned this, questioned that. When's this coming? When's that coming? And of course at the time you think, I'm proper busy. That means I'm really successful. My phone's always going. It's great. I love it. I love how busy I am and how productive I'm being. I'm getting shit done. I'm smashing it. All them things. And yet, Lisa's come from a systems, compliance, procedural world where these things are absolutely critical. And she brought that into my construction business, and it was, let's systemize it. And I was like, no, I don't know about that. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to bring in all these forms to be filling in and all that shit. It's going to take away from production, and people will just be filling in forms instead of doing their jobs. But nothing could be further from the truth. And it came to light this morning. Oddly, my phone was ringing this morning. I had like 5 phone calls in 10 minutes, which was weird. It doesn't normally happen because our business is now systemised and a process, procedural approach to everything that we do. But the phone was ringing, and this is what sparked this. The phone was ringing, I'm thinking, what the fuck's wrong here? Why is my phone fucking going all the time? And it was an issue that we was having on site, which was covered off in a system and a procedure. But the guys had, sort of not read it, or weren't operating this way, didn't know it existed, whatever the excuse was. So immediately I'm thinking, why aren't they following the fucking procedure? They know that it's there. And that's the thing, that they didn't know it was there. So you can have the best systems, procedures, processes in the world, but they're only as good as the people that are using them. Because the guys didn't know, that can's pissing me off. Because the guys didn't know that this system, procedure, process existed, and they can't possibly be expected to execute it. So straight away, when I see all these phone calls, it's, right, we must have something missing. There must be a step in the process missing, there must be something. Why don't the guys know what to do? What's the issue? Why is my phone ringing? Why have they got to get hold of me to resolve this? But they did, and it was. And sometimes you do have to intervene as business owners and jump in and chuck in your 10 bob and sort of steady the ship, as it were. But not all the time, because that's where I was. Before I had all this, it was just, everything was off a notepad, flying around in the front of the van. All them days are so well gone now. I love how we do it now, it's great. Get a program on the job, program of work, so everybody knows where they're meant to be, on what day, and for how long, when they're going to get paid, when the deliveries are coming, when the skips are coming. All that's all scheduled out. And if anything deviates from that, we've got a system to support it and how that is recovered, how it's reported. I'm coming on this morning to talk about a client inquiry that got responded to this morning. The client has asked us to carry out a refurb project from a labour-only basis. Now, the title of this video being, are you inviting challenge or are you introducing risk? This guy here is introducing risk into his world that he doesn't really need to do. And I don't understand still to this day why people want to operate in this manner, why they want to provide the materials for the builder. I get that there's a fear that you're going to be overpaying over the odds for materials now, but that extra margin that the builder's going to put across the materials for supplying them, for delivering that service, you need to look at that number and weigh up the risk involved of you providing materials and dropping a bollock. Morning, Rob. So I'm going to give you an example of a labour-only project that went wrong that we was involved with. Was it last year? I think it was last year. So we had a client that had gauged us on labour-only again and asked us to travel down to a site to carry out a full refurb. And this guy was providing all the gear, all the materials, introducing huge risk into his own world. If his suppliers let him down, or something comes wrong, or there's not enough, or it comes damaged, all of that risk sits with the client because he's provided it. So I'll tell you a tale that this client was providing some patio doors. So he was knocking out a window at the rear of the property, knocking out the masonry beneath the window and fitting some patio doors. So the patio doors arrived when they said they would. They came on the morning ready for us to put in the hole. So we removed the masonry beneath the window, took the window out, unpacked the doors, and the sill was missing, so we couldn't fit them. So now this risk goes back to the client. He needs to get us that sill so we can fit it and leave his property secure. So he couldn't get a sill till the following day, so we had to board up the hole that night. All this is unnecessary cost in material and labour to do that piece of work. Morning, Mandy. The next fuck up, we go the next day, and yeah, maybe we should have checked the measurements, but we didn't, and the doors that came were too big, they were too wide. So the sill had come, and now the doors were too wide to fit in the hole. Problem number 2. So what this problem becomes now is, the guy's got 2 choices. He now has to supply us with another pair of doors, which is another extra cost, because he's bought some doors now that would be useless, or we make the hole bigger. So he decided to make the hole bigger, which means more building work. We need to put in a bigger lintel. This is all time. So his initial sort of view of this thing was to provide the doors himself, and he'll save some money on the margin I would have put across the doors. Now that 20% we would have put across the doors Right, mate. Well, that 20% that we put across the doors is now a nothingness compared to what it's actually cost him in terms of making that hole bigger, the downtime, boarding up the hole, fitting a new lintel. Morning, Chris. Morning, Andy. It puts the 20% margin we would have put across the doors into insignificance, and he's introduced all this risk into his project that he didn't need to do. So do think about that when you're looking at labour-only projects, when you say that you're going to provide the gear. I'm going to provide the kitchen because I'm in LMPG and I can save, £2.50 on what the builder's going to buy it for, or whatever that is. You might be making a saving up front, but you've got to consider the risk that comes with, to provide that. So this client's come to us and asked us to do a labour-only project for him, and we've gone back and sort of asked what his experience of doing a labour-only project is. And this bloke kicked off. You cheeky fucker. I'm the client here, I'm the one asking for the service. What do you mean you're going to check on me? I should be checking on you. Yeah, well, that's fine, you can check on me, but I need to know what your experience is of delivering a project in this manner. If you haven't done it before, this is not something we're prepared to do. It comes with too much risk for me as the builder to be stood there, waiting for materials all the time and having to pay my guys for stood around doing nothing. And this guy didn't really get this, which is great. So it sounds like I dodged a bit of a bullet there. Title of this: once you put the tip in, you've got to go all in. You get the minds out of the gutter. I'm talking about property refurb. Got on the phone with a really good old friend of mine from the military yesterday, who's bought a property. He's gone wrong. I'll just rewind a bit. He's been done some property training with a well-known property trainer, and he's come back, bought a property, started a refurbishment project. And he's got on the phone to me. I was just catching up, really. He's down on the south coast, and he was looking for some advice for this refurb that he had underway. He was 3/4 into the way into it, and his builders told him he needs another 10 grand on the 20 grand that he'd worked out and calculated at the beginning of the project. So he's got a 20k anticipated spend, and his builders told him he needs 30. Now, he got on the phone to me to ask for some advice of how he gets rid of this 10 grand. Now, from what we discussed, this has just simply been missed from his initial numbers. And it did sound like, it's hard for me to say that without actually seeing it and knowing the standard, etc., of what he wants to do and how he's going to do it and in what time period. But it did sound like the builder was being genuine, and this was over the phone again. The mistake that he made was working out that 20k in the first place, and what he'd been taught on this training that I was just talking about, he'd been taught to calculate this refurb using the square metre rate. And for those that don't know what that means, I'm going to explain it, because I had to explain it last night on a live training. When I bang on about how square metre rates don't work on a refurb, I'm not talking about individual tasks where, you might get a square metre rate for a tiler, for example, or maybe a plasterer, or laminate flooring layer, something like that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine, and tradesmen do price up work that way. And there's nothing wrong with buying work that way. But not a whole house. You can't look at a property that's maybe 50 square metres, apply a multiplier to give you a price for the refurb, because that's what my mate did. So the title of this video, you can't put the tip in and then pull it out, is he was 3/4 of the way to this job, and what he was proposing doing is stopping, rethinking his plan and starting again later on in the year. Now, there's absolutely no fucking benefit to that whatsoever. And this is what I told him. It's like swimming 3/4 of the way across the channel and then turning around to go back. If you're going to finish it, then you need to be finishing it as soon as possible. Not kicking the can down the road and starting that later on, restarting it later on. Nothing's going to change. That increased spend on your build cost is the same, no matter whether you do it now or when you do it later. In fact, I'd hasten to add that it's going to be cheaper to do it now before we see material costs go up. So he'd let this fear get hold of him, and this fear of, fuck, I'm going to lose a load of money, take a hold of him and start having an impact on his project and on his own mental health. So we had a good chat about it, and really looking forward to hearing back from him to see what decision that he makes. Hopefully it's the right one. So the purpose of this really was not only to share that story, that tale of woe, was just to be mindful that if something like this does happen on your project, and you do get it might be an extra that you come across, rotten floor joists in the ground floor, something like that needs to be replaced. There's absolutely no point whatsoever in stopping to try and to then restart later on in the year. Once you've had a think about it, you've just got to get through it, get it done, and take the learn. The biggest cost on your project is time, so the longer that it takes you, the more that it costs you. It costs you more in time than it does to pause, take stock and think, and then come back. I wanted to share with you a little top tip. We've come from pricing up a project over the Christmas break. Well, priced it before, but we shared the numbers over the Christmas break. And this guy's response to our build cost price was, I can't afford that. Now, I gave this loads and loads of thought. Am I actually too expensive? And we was about right in terms of the going market rate. Maybe a little bit more expensive, but not sort of way out. Maybe a couple of grand. But I believe what we had in value and service warrants that. But what it set me about thinking was, the guy was saying that this number I gave him didn't fit within his own numbers. So where did his own build cost estimation come from in the first place? And it set me about thinking a few other projects that we've priced, some we've won, some we lost. And more often than not, the ones that we don't win are for that same reason. Now, I believe that is when a deal's been stacked based upon an ideology. And it might be that, just to give you an example, a guy wants to make 20k on a refurb, so he buys one at 50. It's going to be worth 90 when it's done. So by default, his build cost must be 20k. And I see this type of thing regular. And you cannot price up a build like that using that approach. There's 6 key fundamental basics to pricing up a build, which I'm going to run through on the webinar that's running on Sunday. If you're not registered, www.constructiontrainingacademy.com/webinar. Jump on that one. I'm going to run through all these things that are critical. But you've got to decide these things before you even look at a build cost. You can't just go into a property, give it the eyes all over, and then shoot out a number. Because the number's not based on anything other than your ideology of the deal. And then what we try and do is convince ourselves that it can be done for that number. The more visits that we do, the more that we look at the deal. The purchase price and the end value aren't going anywhere, they're fixed. So the thing we've got to try and do now is deliver on the build cost. So we're all about budget management now, which is one of the 6 cornerstones of what I'm going to be talking about on Sunday. But the biggest one for me, and the biggest mistake that I see people making, is time. People that don't value time don't give it its due. Time's the biggest cost on your project. Any project that runs over is costing more money, regardless of who's doing the work, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're getting contractors in to do it. If it's taking longer than it should, not longer than anticipated, longer than it should, then it's costing you more money to deliver it. I bang on about this all the time, how important it is to fix a start date, fix a finish date, and start generating income or the release of that equity post-project. Because until you've got that, you haven't made anything. So the longer it goes on, your overheads endure and your profits and returns aren't coming in. This morning I want to talk about a a post I'm starting to see more regular. People asking for the best this and the best that. Where's the best place to buy a kitchen from? Where's the best place to buy a bathroom from? It's come as a result of a repair as I've had done at my own house this morning. Somebody once asked me where's the best place to buy a set of bifold doors from. I'm going back 6 months now, and I gave this guy the details of the guy that had fitted him at my house. And he comes back sort of 6 weeks later and said, that guy you gave me for that price for them bifolds, he was really expensive. And I was like, well, yeah. He said, well, you said that they were the best. Well, they are the best, that's not what you asked me for. You asked me for the best, you didn't ask me for the cheapest. So I guess what I'm saying is it's okay to want to know who the cheapest is for a certain thing. But you can't then expect that cheapest thing to then be the best thing. And it came as a result, we had our bifolds are 3.3 metres, I think they are, wide. Morning, Donny. Hope you're well, mate, not seen you for ages. Yeah, I think they're 3.3 wide, and we paid 3,600 fitted aluminium bifolds. Yes, some might say that you can buy them cheaper than that. But we had a problem with a lock yesterday. It wouldn't lock, and the glass needed toe annealing. I wasn't doing it myself because I'm likely to scratch the grey off the aluminium. So I got back in touch with the guy that fitted them last night. Told him we had an issue with the lock and they wouldn't lock. And he's out this morning. And now that's the service that I want. That's the service I'm paying for. If I've bought them off eBay at 1,800 quid and my mates from the pubs fitted them, that service is not happening. So I guess the message is there's a huge difference between the cheapest and the best. You've got to know what you're truly looking for. If you are looking for the cheapest, then ask for the cheapest. Don't ask for the best person or the best supplier or the best provider when what you're truly looking for is the cheapest. Because the two things are usually different. Usually. Tradesmen as well. You get this with tradesmen. Who's the best roofer around? Who's the best tiler around? You'll have that person in your town. What you really mean is, who's the cheapest? That's what you're really asking. And it's okay to ask for that. It's okay to ask for who the cheapest is, if that's what you're looking for. But don't get expecting bells and whistles premium service from the cheapest. It's not going to happen. The two things don't go together.